Добрый день, коллеги.
Good afternoon, and we continue with a series of press conferences in view of the general meeting of shareholders of Gazprom. In earlier press conferences, we discussed operational matters and also the power generation business. Today, our topic is gas export and enhancing reliability of gas supply to Europe. With us today are Mr. Alexander Medvedev, Deputy Chairman of the Management Committee, and Mr. Sergei Kuznets, Deputy Head of Department, and Ms. Elena Burmistrova, General Director for Gazprom Export. And now over to Mr. Medvedev. Good afternoon, esteemed ladies and gentlemen, media representatives, and I think it's the first time we welcome you here in St. Petersburg. As far as I understand, we have quite a lot of people watching and listening online. And it's not only about those journalists in the room. I assume questions are welcome from those who are present in this hall as well as those who watch and listen online. In order to save time for the well-prepared question session from you, I'll be rather concise with my introduction. The year we had just recently, 2017, followed suit that of 2016 in terms of being record high. It was a record high year, absolutely, because we had 194.2 billion cubic meters, the absolute high record of gas deliveries to Europe. This was gas supplied by Gazprom Export under commission agreement with Gazprom, and also that includes gas from Gazprom Schweiz. Considering 2018, the year we are in today, the start of this year was very successful as well. We are by about nearly 5 billion cubic meters ahead of the delivery schedule, as was the fact in 2017. Conservative outlook suggests that our export volumes in 2018 is going to be record high again, and we are currently looking at the range of 196 or 197 billion cubic meters. And I would like to underline it yet again, this outlook is conservative. 2018 marked yet another record of daily export volumes to export countries in just one day. That happened not in December, not in January, not in February, but rather in March, as a gift to the International Women's Day, or in view of the International Women's Days. 713.4 million cubic meters, that happened on the 2nd of March. If you multiply that peak by 365 days in the year, you can understand the production potential Gazprom enjoys when it comes to exports into foreign countries. So that would be more than 714 million cubic meters a day. That's the capacity we enjoy on the operational side, be it production and transportation. This serves to prove the immense potential Gazprom has to satisfy the growing demand for gas from exports markets, including Europe. And Europe is definitely going to need imported gas. Let me explain. Even if consumption in general does not grow and remains flat at its current level, or even comes down somewhat, as we often hear in some statements coming from Europe, nevertheless, indigenous production in European countries are going to outpace that, and I'm referring mostly to the Groningen field in the Netherlands, which is on its way to shut down. Over the recent years, it has come down by more than 4 times in terms of production volumes, given the risk, not just an earthquake, but rather some flooding that it could cause. That's why Groningen field is said to be completely shut down within some short time. In the United Kingdom, as well as in Norway, the situation is the same. They're definitely facing production cuts, and that is going to be rather fast-tracked, I should say. So that is happening sooner than expected. Hence, analysts who had initially suggested lower demand for imported gas as compared to Gazprom's outlook 5 years ago. 5 years ago, Gazprom had expected this situation to come. Well, currently the consensus import forecast have been reviewed, and I'm talking about not only the absolute imports, but rather the additional imports. Even very conservative analysts currently suggest that by 2025 imports can be as high as 60 billion of additional cubic meters, and by the year of 2030 that could be 80 additional billion cubic meters rather than 40 than some suggested a few years back. If you're trying to be realistic, then additional import volumes beyond 2013 may not only exceed 100 BCM of additional imports and get some really close to 200 billion cubic meters of additional imports. The question is whether that's happening by 2035 or 2040. Speaking of which, it's by 2040 that we have extended our contract with Olivenfau, and that particular date doesn't come out of nowhere. As usual, you'd be interested in the pricing side as well. Price outlook for 2018. As you may well know, the exports portfolio of Gazprom has adapted to the changes in European markets. So on top of the traditional oil-linked formula, we have also proposed a hybrid formula combining gas hub prices with a range floor and ceiling set by the basket of petrochemicals. So even if there is a hub link, forecasting that has become really easy. So if you take a look at our contract portfolio and consider the price of $197 per thousand cubic meters as of 2017 full year, our expectation for 2018 is around 220. It's like the voltage you have in the electrical current, with a potential upside beyond $220 per thousand cubic meters. Now, let me explain why we're cautious. You'd better be conservative in your forecast rather than enjoy unfounded optimism. However, with each month passing, our optimism is going to grow because oil is still in a huge correlation with the gas prices on more or less liquid hubs, including NBP and the United Kingdom, German hubs, and TTF in the Netherlands. So the price is going to be higher than in 2017 by at least 23 or even 28 US dollars per thousand cubic meters. And then on top of that comes the FX ratios between the ruble and the dollar and the euro. These movements resulted in record high ruble revenue in 2017, which enables Gazprom to plan its investment program or capital expenditures to implement our major investment projects. You're well aware of what these projects are. This includes Nord Stream 2 as well as Turk Stream, the first string of which has already been constructed, and we see work ongoing at the intake terminal in Turkey. As of recent, heads of agreement was signed on the intergovernmental level to build a second string within the Turkish territory so that gas could get to the border of Greece and Bulgaria and be taken further up so that each country along its route could develop their gas transportation system in line with the applicable rules of the European Commission. So gas transport operators are working along the lines set forth by the European Union to make sure that gas transportation networks of those countries are capable of transporting the extra gas volumes. Other major projects include a project to supply Russian gas to the People's Republic of China. The date for this to happen has already been set. That is going to start in December 2019. The Power of Siberia pipeline is under construction on schedule. And the same is true for the Chinese section of the pipeline. Our Chinese colleagues are working on schedule. The river crossover across the Amur isn't being completed, and the Amur gas processing plant, which is closely linked to that project, is under construction as well, and that is going on schedule. So gas diversification, gas destination diversification as part of our strategy is going to be implemented as of December next year. Next project is Sakhalin-2, third train. It has been successfully endorsed by the Government Expert Review Committee, and we are entitled now to make the final investment decision, which is coming either at the end of this year in Q4 or in Q1 next year. Another promising project is Baltic LNG with the capacity of up to 15 million tons. We work on that in partnership with our colleagues from Shell. Baltic LNG schedule suggests that the final investment decision is coming next year. Pre-FEED studies have demonstrated with all certainty that the project is going to be competitive. I would even say one of the most competitive projects on the global market. Okay? Gazprom's operations are based on long-term planning, and we are confident that the plans just outlined will be implemented, and a major contribution comes thanks to our export operations, including exports to former Soviet Union countries and other countries as well. You have all the stats, I assume, so this concludes my quick introduction. To open the floor for your questions, please. And we have time until 3 p.m. So 40 minutes, like a class in school. And I have noticed that, as far as I recollect, even journalists seem to be at a loss after 40 minutes of questioning. Yeah. Okay. The first question comes from TASS, Evgenia Sokolova. Question to Mr. Medvedev. I would like to ask the most painful subject. Question painful for you or us? Naftogaz has made some windfall statements about asset seizures in Germany and the Netherlands, whether that is going to affect Nord Stream 2 or other deliveries of Russian gas to Europe. Answer. Given that the question you have posed is very much legally rooted, I would suggest that Mr. Sergei Kuznets provides you with an answer. Yes, we are aware of the statements made by Naftogaz and other participants in that process in terms of their attempts to enforce the Stockholm arbitration decision. We cannot confirm any seizures or arrests as yet because Gazprom has not been duly notified officially about it. The thing is, the Switzerland and the Netherlands that are mentioned in this regard are signatories to dedicated international procedure, which provides for a particular notification process. It provides for the Ministry of Justice of each corresponding country to be involved, and Gazprom has not received any documents of that kind. We do expect this notification to arrive, and we are undertaking efforts to defend the interest of PGC Gazprom. As soon as we get any further details, we'll be happy to disclose that to the interested public. Whether these events are going to affect our operations, I think, as a shareholder of Nord Stream AG, Nord Stream 2 board member, I can tell you that both companies operate normally, as usual, and we carry on to implement the functions of these two entities. Next question, please. Please go ahead. The question comes from Elena Mazneva. Actually, two questions, if I may, and even more, if we have the time. I would really be thankful for that. Just to carry on with Ukraine, understandably, various legal procedures are happening in parallel. You're trying to get a Swedish court decision to make the Stockholm arbitration void, but given the remedies that are being sought, wouldn't it be easier for Gazprom to pay $2.6 billion and then get that payment back should the Stockholm arbitration decision is considered void? Wouldn't that be better for your reputation? What arguments do you have against paying that amount upfront? And the next question will come after you have answered this one. Well, you know, the question you're posing sounds weird. Wouldn't it be better in terms of your reputation? Well, as you have just heard from Mr. Kuznets, we don't have any official information regarding any actions of the Ukrainian side against Gazprom. So, this is a complex procedure. You know that, well, money likes it quiet, and the same is true for legal matters, litigation, and that complicated a matter do require some quiet as well. I suggest that we get back to the subject of our press conference. We have a question from Interfax. Question 1, when are you starting gas deliveries to Turkey using the first string of TurkStream? And the second question is this: are you still considering a second string of TurkStream turning to Bulgaria from the Black Sea, or only via Turkey? Gas deliveries via TurkStream, string 1, with the destination Turkey, are set to start before the end of 2019. A specific date for that start depends not only on the offshore section construction, but also on the readiness of the Turkish gas transportation system. It's going on schedule, but there is no concern, again, no doubt that deliveries will start in 2019, before the end of the year. And the second question is whether you're still considering the second string of TurkStream going to Bulgaria from the Black Sea, or only via Turkey. You have rightly marked it that as the Bulgarian president and the Prime Minister visited us, the Bulgarian side raised this question, or whether we could reach their territory directly using the second stream, effectively repeating the South Stream project. In my view, that reflects the regret of the Bulgarian side that at some point in the past Bulgaria effectively blocked implementation of the South Stream project, which was very much ready for implementation. But again, these visits that I have just referred to happened very promptly, within just a couple of weeks after the intergovernmental agreement, the intergovernmental protocol was signed with the Turkish side to implement the onshore section of String 2 of Turk Stream. Each party has undertaken certain commitments. Considering further prospective developments, well, as a rule, you normally finish with one business and then take on another business. I have mentioned the additional import volumes for gas that Europe is set to require by the years of 2025, 2030, 2035 and 2040. Many experts agree that, and we've had statements by Mr. Alexei Miller, the chairman of Gazprom, well, in case Europe has guaranteed demand, Gazprom has enough gas to satisfy that demand, and understandably, new extra volumes would require extra pipelines. What the routing could be, what the destination could be, is too early to discuss. Speaking on the Bulgarian question, well, we'd better ask the participants of those negotiations. Okay, next question, please. Again, RIA Novosti. Maria Grebar, RIA Novosti. Just to follow on Ukraine and transit via Ukraine, given the Naftogaz action on asset seizure, are you still negotiating the new transit agreement post-2019, and whether Gazprom has prepared its proposition to Naftogaz for guaranteed transit volumes post-2019, and what those volumes are? Thank you. Well, if you have been following the media closely, be it printed media or TV, well, yes, there was a plan to have three-party negotiations involving the Russian, the Ukrainian, and the European representatives at the ministers' levels. Having received no confirmation, we find out now that the Ukrainian side is undertaking some action. Whether the negotiations are happening or not, I think this question must be asked not to us. Vedomosti. Artur Toprakov, Vedomosti. Just to clarify on the Ukrainian transit. On numerous occasions, it was stated that a transit agreement could be extended if the financial terms, the economic terms, are found acceptable. So, what would you consider acceptable? And another part of my question is this. You have numerously stated that you could still have 10 to 15 billion cubic meters of gas transit via Ukraine per year, and you need some extra backup capacity in case there is a major issue with one of your existing pipelines. What kind of reserve capacity would you like to have via Ukraine, and what are you going to discuss with Ukraine? Well, you're making some rather categorical conclusions about the need of spare capacity. Well, it's like with Baumgarten. Some quote-unquote experts, if I may put it this way, have tried to suggest that gas supplies from Russia to Europe are not reliable because of this Baumgartner story. But what really happened is just an accident at a metering facility, not in the underground storage itself, but just at a metering facility, given a major infringement of fire and safety rules. Unfortunately, there was a lethal case. The person who made this tragic area passed away, and obviously poor weather and high humidity led to this accident. The accident was mitigated within a very short time, and on the following day gas transit was fully recovered. Considering the underwater sections of pipelines, look at the Blue Stream history. The only interruption we had was related to preventive repairs, which could take up to 1 week, and you don't really need it every year. And then Blue Stream has been in operation since 2004, if I'm not mistaken, or 2005. So for 13 years running, Blue Stream has been in operation as if it were a Swiss watch. Or you could compare that to Pobeda clock, Pobeda watch, produced in Russia. That runs really well. So your statement is really questionable whether we need any extra capacity. You're making this conclusion, but in fact, you know, the transit volumes are going to depend on other drivers. What our president, the country's president, has mentioned is economically feasible conditions. It's not just about the gas transit tariff, which must be reasonable, but also guarantees to comply with that tariff. Because, well, Ukraine has mentioned it's part of the European community, so to say, and hence the tariff is going to be set by the government regulator. With whom should we negotiate then? With a regulator or with whom? The questions are rather simple, but no answer is available so far. If that is true, then Naftogaz is no longer responsible for the transit tariff. The same applies to Ukrtransgaz. But we need a party to negotiate with, don't we? So, I think it's not only dangerous to run that far ahead in such matters, but we really don't need that. Oksana Kobzar from Reuters. I have several questions, if I may. One question refers to discounts you have provided to Turkey. At the recent conference call, you mentioned that some of the retroactive payments will be accounted for as future periods discounts. Does this mean that Turkey is getting a discount not only for 2015 and 2016, but also for other years looking forward? And how much of the discount will be provided? My other question relates to the antitrust investigation by the European Commission. As part of your settlement with the European Commission, what amendments are going to be introduced into Gazprom's exports contracts? And finally, my further question to clarify Sakhalin 2 third train. I'm wondering why you're still postponing your final investment decision. Thank you. As it often happens, information available from the media, be it Russian media or Turkish media, well, it does have something to do with reality, but to put it mildly, it's rather doesn't match that reality. So, When one looks at the numbers, one could assume there has been some rounding effect. Ms. Elena Burmistrova, the General Director of Gazprom Export, was directly involved in these negotiations, and then she could follow up on my answer. We have a contract price in place up until 2017, and regarding the payments, please explain. That's right. We have provided voters with discounts for 2015 and 2016. We carry on with the original contract price now. I would like to emphasize it that the price agreement was made as an out-of-court settlement between the parties. That required a major negotiation exercise. I wouldn't want to disclose the absolute amount of payments due because it's a commercial element, but I would like to explain that it is split into two parts. One would be provided as rebates or retroactive payments, and the other part will be provided in the form of discounts for future deliveries. That's the major thing. Okay, let's move on. The antitrust settlement. That was a lengthy and often somewhat painful process. You may well remember how it all started with document seizures from our offices or offices of our affiliates in those countries which initiated the antitrust investigation. But after a while, this process was converted into a fully professional discussion, and even though the statement of objections and the Russian translations for that could be really versatile, some people translate that term into Russian as a claim, but I would rather suggest translating that into Russian as a concern that needed to be addressed. So, I believe that with very skilled experts involved from Gazprom and also international experts whom we brought in to prove that our pricing scheme is not discriminatory to those countries who have filed their cases with the European Commission. Well, some of those concerns were related to the market segmentation, the so-called market segmentation. Just let's rewind a little bit back. We did have the so-called destination clause in our contracts, and we started removing those clauses before the antitrust investigation began. I would like to reiterate it, and I'm happy to do that many times, that Gazprom pioneered gas price liberalization in Europe. In Germany, no one presented us with a major market share. We set up a JV with BASF back in 1991, and across these many years of successful operations and having made major investments into gas transportation, which is no longer possible for vertically integrated businesses now, this burden has been shifted over to gas transport operators who have received the right to be entitled to a certain particular margin. So, in pretty much monopolized gas market of Germany, Gazprom pioneered liberalization efforts. No one presented us for free with a market share, but we've managed to come up to 15% from zero, having worked with our partners for multiple years running. Nevertheless, the concerns, charges, or doubts put forth by the European Commission Gazprom Export, including these people in front of you, including Ms. Elena Burmistrova, met our partners in Europe on a number of occasions. On the working level, there were so many meetings you can't really count them. Given that the market is changing and we adjust to those changes without any investigation running, because Gazprom is interested in developing its customer market. Hence, we keep investing into underground storage facilities, which adds to the energy security, and equally it adds to developing the market opportunities. The European Commission suggested this idea of free flow of gas between different countries within the EU. However, if we consider the northwestern part of Europe, that is truly the case, which is the case thanks to multi-billion investments. And diversified sources, because it's not the number of traders that counts, it's the number of real gas sources. So, considering such countries as the Baltics or Bulgaria, one must admit objectively that their position is different from that of the northwestern Europe. However, we managed to find a solution together with the European Commission, which we had a market test, which was market tested and further adjusted based on the results of the test. Customers in one country are entitled to request gas supply from another country if the transportation capacity is available, and the economic terms for that are also put forth. This comes thanks to a very specific negotiation process with in-depth analysis of the gas transportation networks within each country and the possibility of deliveries. If you take a map, just a map, it's easy to draw all sorts of lines to illustrate gas flows, but gas flows are guided by laws of physics, and gas will never go to a transportation network where the pressure is lower than from where it's coming from. Sometimes people forget it, but laws of physics are still in place, and a joint effort with the European Commission resulted in complete dismissal of claims or opinions once it was proven that there is no real claim, and sometimes those claims or wishes had true market reality underlying, which was converted into our agreements that are entering into force. I hope that this is not going to be repeated. Questions? Next question, please. Oh, sorry. There was another question already asked but not answered, and just like I said, last quarter of this year, or the first quarter of this year, that was about Sakhalin 2 third train. We have quite a few projects in the Far East, and again, please don't forget that Far East is a territory for as a development territory, which is a fast-track development area under the Russian laws, and the level of gasification is still lagging behind. There are a number of projects by Russian companies, including projects that need gas. So you need to count in for all these factors. Obviously, we'll be picking the most effective projects. But again, Sakhalin 1, Sakhalin 2, and Sakhalin 3 does not limit the capacities of Sakhalin and the Far East. Sakhalin 4 and Sakhalin 5 are available in the longer-term forecast by the Ministry of Natural Resources. These are based on unconfirmed or unproven reserves as yet, but the success of originally proven reserves upgraded into a larger number, well, this gives us some optimism because we run a long-term business with 25 or 30 years outlook rather than 10 or 15, so I wouldn't say we are lagging behind or postponing something. And then again, we are doing everything with high quality, and it's not by chance that the state expert review has resulted in a positive opinion, and we got that from our first try without any reservations. A question asked from the webcast, which customers are entitled to review their contracts with Gazprom following the decision of the European Commission. Answer: we don't have any commitments to review any contracts. We have discussed with the European Commission a particular procedure, how the price could be reviewed, at which point in time, when one could get a joker, a so-called joker, and those rights are mutual. It's not always that customers come to us to get the price reduced. We can do that as well. With our years at Gazprom, both Ms. Burmistrova and myself have often, well, on more than one occasion, approached our customers for a price hike, and the same applies to those countries who had filed their cases with the European Commission. And just a quick follow-up, both Gazprom and Gazprom Export are ready to amend those contracts that are eligible for such amendments, and we are also ready to reach out to our customers for such amendments where we see fit. But again, there is nothing radical, nothing dramatic. Everything is going to happen in day-to-day business, and implementation will be monitored by the European Commission, of course. In my opinion, this is a remarkable result indeed. The European Commission has approached this in a well-balanced way, and that deserves some respect given the political pressure exercised. The eventual resolution is fair, in our view, and economically reasonable, which is very pleasant. Thank you. Next question from Mir Mahid Babayev, Mir TV. I have a question to Ms. Burmistrova. Recently we celebrated 50th anniversary of deliveries to Austria. It was Cold War, and Vienna still decided to go ahead for the Russian gas. What the results of this cooperation? And then again, the contract has been re-signed as of recently, although it was in effect up until 2028. What does it tell us, given the negative backdrop of Russia's relationship with the West? Thank you so much. Very nice to hear that, because again, it was the first official visit by the Russian president in his re-elected capacity to Austria, and that coincided with the contract extension and also the celebration of gas deliveries to Austria, 50th anniversary thereof, July 1968. You're right, that's when Vienna decided to buy gas from the Soviet Union, and we have heard some very exciting legends about, or stories about, how that happened as we celebrated. The Austrian partners who decided to go ahead with the Russian gas have won from that, as they see from today. There was intense competition against against gas coming from Norway or Algiers, but Austria is still happy to carry on with gas deliveries from Russia, and they have extended their contract. While the FAO and politicians attending the celebration have spoken negatively of alternatives sources such as US LNG coming to Europe, which is a very telling proof that our key partners in Europe are ready to carry on working with Gazprom. Our energy source is competitive, we are flexible, we are reliable, and when peak demand kicks in, we can satisfy that in full. The visit went well, very well organized, with very warm feelings remaining in the hearts, such as my heart, for example. And as I could see, Mr. Miller also had some very warm feelings. This is just the right example of a long-term and long-standing relationship, resulting in some benefits that could well be leveraged on by not only us, but also future generations of Gazprom employees. As far as the legends question, was that a difficult decision? Well, there was major pressure, obviously, in the past, pressure from NATO, and Austria still decided to go ahead with that decision, whether they wanted to deal with the Soviet Union or not. Well, frankly, they didn't know whom to approach, the Ministry of Foreign Trade or the Ministry of Gas Industry, like how to run that procedure. Someday we'll write some memoirs on that matter. Thank you. Energy Intelligence. Vitaly Sokolov asking the question. I would like to revert to the antitrust investigation and have a quick question about the Turk Stream. If I read the statement by the European Commission correctly, there is a point providing for your cooperation with gas transportation network in Bulgaria. I'm wondering whether your approach to Trans-Balkanian pipeline or pipeline across the Balkans, would you see any change here? Would the third energy package apply to that project? Because the European Commission has always had this feature of these norms not applicable. Whether you still consider that as an extension of Turk Stream or not. And one other question also relates to the Turk Stream. And there was another route discussed previously to have gas delivered from Turkey via Greece to Italy. You must have discussed the Poseidon project in your recent meetings, whether you're still considering that as an extension of Turk Stream. Thank you. Well, you know, this coin has two sides as well. Working with the procedure for working with gas transport operators of certain countries in view of the recent changes in each country is one thing, and the antitrust investigation is another thing. They didn't consider gas transport operators in the antitrust investigation. The concern of the antitrust investigation was about the free flow of gas between the countries, while the operators were just servicing function. So we do have some agreements with the operators running rather in test mode, and since those are in a test mode, I don't think we can comment on that as yet. One of the conditions provided is that we will not claim any damage compensation from Bulgaria, given the failed South Stream project, and we're not doing that, of course. What we are saying is they want us to consider a reversal of that decision and potentially discuss that project again. Well, If you asked me when new destination routes are going to be constructed from Russia to Europe, I'm sure that time is coming if there is a good demand backed by money. How that is going to be called is that is going to be called is a different question. And Project Poseidon, well, you know, there is a saying, you can't really kill two birds with one stone. We considered two birds. From Turkey via Greece to Italy, or to Baumgarten via Bulgaria. But again, let me emphasize that we are not involved in developing the gas transportation networks of the countries lying along that route. In view of the recent European regulations, that is the duty of the local gas transport operators. They have a procedure. They run an auction to get the gas, and they are welcome to invest the money. They bring the money from the European financial markets, fully in line with the procedure to build the extra capacity required. From our side, we are ready to claim the transportation capacities fully in line with our contracts. If someone else wants to have the capacity, it doesn't mean that we are getting less. We've seen that in the past. Well, there was a rule, take or pay, so, and there was a rule, like if you don't use the capacity, you lose it. And we've seen examples of people buying capacities in auctions and then losing that capacity because that was not used. Because they bought it and then started speculating the extra capacity, and they ran out of gas. Some of those companies actually suffered a lot. The thing is, Gazprom has gas, and we need gas transportation capacities to transport it. Following that story with South Stream, where we did intend to build a gas transportation capacity in those other countries, well, the message we got from the European Commission, then no, we are not supposed to do that. Okay, we comply, we'll follow the regulations of the European Union, so we expect the new rules to be fully utilized. With the example of Nord Stream 2, we see that the Ugal pipeline construction is fully in line with the new regulations, so the gas transport operators consortium is involved in what they're supposed to be doing, fully on schedule, and we are satisfied with the developments. In Eastern Europe, Southeastern Europe, the market is less developed than in Northwestern Europe, so we're still waiting for this to happen, fully in line with the new rules imposed. Again, Gazprom fully complies with these new rules, and we are ready to proceed along those rules in current and future projects. And just a quick follow-up on Project Poseidon. Indeed, Project Poseidon is still under consideration as a potential extension of Turk Stream. Question: how about killing two birds with one stone? Answer: we're not trying to pursue any birds, we're just building, and we're building rather fast. Question: so you're considering both Italy and Baumgarten via Bulgaria? Answer: we are considering all options. It would be weird if we didn't do it like that. Well, the thing is, you can prioritize the way you wish, but again, A particular destination will be defined once an auction has been run, which is a guaranteed source of capacity. This could happen for one destination as well as the other destination. I wouldn't assess the probabilities at this point in time. Okay, on top of the internet webcast, we have an intercom link with TASS press room in Moscow. Good afternoon, colleagues. Any questions from Moscow now? Anastasia Goreva, Argus Media. I have two questions. One is to clarify the Turkish team development. When are you expecting to define finally, be it Greece or Bulgaria, from Turkey? Have you come to any specific arrangements with European gas transport operators that they do intend actually to expand their gas transit capacities within Russian gas coming? My other question relates to the underground storages in Europe. How much gas did you inject last year? How much did you have last year? How much gas did you produce from underground storages last year? Did you use services of third parties or not? And how much do you intend to pump in the course of this year? And what kind of consumption do you expect this year? And whether you are set to involve third parties this year? Thank you. I have to reiterate this. The final destination or final route of the pipeline will be determined once the binding auction has taken place for gas transport operators, and namely Bulgarian one in this particular story, or the Greek one has run or hasn't run actually. That is the question to the operator. We're ready. We're ready. The thing is, when we were an investor or a co-investor, that was one story. Now we're not an investor into gas transport capacities. So we're only interested in capacities available that we can use in the longer term to comply with our exports contracts. Considering the underground storages, we do have those in Western Europe, which we have built up and multiplied manifold. As of recent, we had much less capacity available. Now we have more than 5 billion cubic meters per annum. But on top of our own capacities, we also rent that as well. And we do that for two reasons, for several reasons. We want to make sure that even at the coldest of winters, although winter was mild, and that is true for the last couple of years, still they now understand in Europe how much of role gas plays in ensuring the energy security of those countries. Hence, the Europeans were actively using gas underground storages in the past couple of winters, and now that the remaining gas, the inventories, gas inventories, both in absolute and in relative terms, has come to its absolute minimum. Well, up until recently, we were operating in pretty much winter mode, delivering more than 500 million cubic meters per day. Even though it's nearly summer, right? It's June. gas deliveries as high as we did in winter 3 or 4 years ago. Again, gas has demonstrated its benefit against coal, and that comes thanks to a great degree to the underground storage capacities. So we do have our own capacities, we do have leased capacities from third parties, and our objective is very simple. In view of the autumn and winter period, we would like to have 8.5 billion cubic meters of active gas in own and leased storages, which we would be able to use also in peak periods when the demand is particularly high. So, for a number of years now, there wasn't a single day in winter when we could not satisfy the demand, although the demand has always been high, pretty much close to the ceiling of the existing contracts, and the underground storages play a major factor, a major role in this capability. And again, one must link that to the gas transportation capacities. Russian gas underground storages are also expanding in line with the long-term development plan. We have more than 70 billion gas of active gas in Russian and underground storages every winter. A question coming from Rambler, Vasily Milkin. I have a question on Nord Stream 2. What's the progress with bank financing for that project? When are the credits coming? And could you name some banks or other credit organizations that are ready to invest? And so, project financing efforts are going on by our teams, including our advisors. I understand that journalists are mostly interested in the process rather than the result, as it often happens. Well, I don't think I can comment on the process. I have always explained it to you that I'm interested in the result, although the process could be exciting. Would like to thank the team in Moscow, and we are back in St. Petersburg. We are beyond the originally planned time. So, 2 more questions from Bloomberg and Vedomosti. I would like to ask my other question that I intended to ask originally. I understand that money likes like it quiet, and the same is true for legal procedure. Well, when would you expect to pay 2.6 billion? Because the investors are interested in that as well. Question: are you also one? Answer: no. I just represent the interest of my readers. There is a lot of interest, and I would like to hear an answer. So, legal question, a legal answer then. Indeed, Gazprom has made provisions in its accounting. We have to do that. That's a must under Russian accounting standards as well as international financial reporting standards. As soon as a potential liability comes up, we need to make a provision. But this doesn't mean we have to pay immediately, because, as you are aware, Gazprom is unhappy with the Stockholm arbitration decision. We believe there were major procedural violations, and we have filed a case with the Swedish court to overturn that. So there is no guarantee that if we pay the money now, we'll get the money back in case the decision is reversed. So we'll keep on with the litigation. Question: but is there any time, like until autumn or when? Answer: no particular timing. That's why Naftogaz is trying to seize some assets to force a payment from Gazprom. We believe there is no need to be hasty here. We need to figure out the final truth here. and have the I's dotted and the T's crossed. We believe the chances are high for the Stockholm arbitration decision to be overturned. Well, okay, apologies for a final question. Apologies about another question on Ukraine. Why didn't you start gas deliveries in March, as was originally expected? Is that about the lack of addendum to the agreement? If so, then is it in place now? If not, then what's the problem? Which particular terms and conditions still on the table? And another follow-up question, given that deliveries were not started in March, does Ukraine have the technical possibility to use up 4 billion cubic meters of gas this year, which is the take-or-pay volume? If not, then are you prepared to revolve the outstanding take-or-pay amount from this year's to next year once you have come to the extension of the contract? Gazprom has already commented on that subject, so I can simply repeat what was already mentioned in the press releases and comments from chairman of the management committee, Mr. Miller. A. Deliveries have not started. B. In order for them to start, we need the addendum to be signed. And that comes as a request of the Ukrainian side, first and foremost. We have proof to that matter, documentary proof. In the time between the first and the second decisions of the arbitration tribunal, a number of events occurred which upset the balance between the two contracts which had existed. Without reinstating that balance, duly reflected in the addendum, well, we need for those terms to be reflected. And the fact that the addendum is required is not our position, that is the position of the Ukrainian side. That's the situation today. Do I get it right that with the second arbitration decision that upsets the balance, as you call it, you don't see fit continued negotiations on the first decision, right? Answer: we don't negotiate on the arbitration decisions. I'm referring to implementation of the arbitration decision, that is the addendum. Well, following the second decision, which we were not happy with, we proposed it to Ukraine to revert to the balance originally set, because in our view the court interfered with that balance, and the balance was upset, as Mr. Medvedev said. The parties ran a number of negotiation rounds where Gazprom suggested its propositions to reinstate the balance. The Ukrainian side rejected all of those. No agreement has been made, and that's exactly why Gazprom has got to the arbitration again with another case requesting either to reinstate the balance or just to avoid the contracts, because they don't request the financial interest of the parties. And then regarding your take-or-pay question, that is usually judged at the end of the year, so it would be too early to comment on the 4 billion take-or-pay volume. Thanks to everyone taking part. So next time we meet is the 15th of June, and it will be dedicated to the Far Eastern projects.